show. But the TV show was like this huge targeted ad that was coming out every Friday night. And so, I got like 7 years worth of audience growth in 3 months. That was the best part. The worst part is realizing that how much of the dream factory in Hollywood is not run by nerds. And that's really a problem because you can turn to people and drop references and so on, and they just kind of look at you blankly, and I find myself thinking, oh my God, they're not of the tribe. How do I relate to these people? No, you've never compared Babylon 5 and DS9 in your life. How can you even have a conversation? But that's probably the worst part, because there's all these folks that, and as a writer, I'm biased, and I have my own bias of what's important in a production, and I think good writing is very important, évidemment. But that's probably the worst part. Is you have to share control of things with people. I don't like sharing control of things with people. Not even Hollywood people, But there's other people doing creative stuff as well, and it's very much. Writing is an industry that I can do all by myself and nobody can say anything about it. My editor can, but she just kind of, at this point, she just kind of goes, oh. So it's basically me. But when you're working in Hollywood, you've got all these other people to work with, and you got to make them happy, and they have concerns that have nothing to do with anything in the story, which is the most important thing in the world to me. So it's these people. I had to send off an email just now, but and that's why I was a little late paying attention to you. Apologies, but they needed to know something. So, we're in development. I don't know if you guys knew that. We're in development now. Temple Hill Pictures and Fox 21. So we're talking about what we're going to be doing. Eventually things might happen. I wouldn't hold my breath though if I were you guys. So, we'll see. Hollywood is always nothing happens, nothing happens. Everything happens at exactly the same time. There's no between there. There's neutral and 100 miles an hour, and that's it. And everybody who works in Hollywood perpetually lives in the 100 miles an hour part of the cycle, which is why they're a little crazy, I think. Because wow, that would be a tough way to live. Maybe some people really like it. I don't know. But.
How you started out with this formula of Jeff Chester's that you followed along, and it worked out for you. How has your process changed and evolved since then?
I've become less arrogant. Maybe. But other than that, no, it hasn't changed. I still use exactly the same lessons I learned in her class every day when I go to work. It was a practical class taught by somebody who was a professional novelist. She actually taught well. So yeah, I do that stuff every day. There were days in that class that were like, here is the business etiquette of a New York lunch, and they would teach you all the things about New York lunches so that you didn't look like a rube. Stuff like that, practical knowledge, which was very handy coming from somebody who actually worked in the business. She had tried for years to convince me a lot of different things about writing that were very intelligent things that I didn't want to pay attention to. And the whole time, I didn't listen to her because I had a bachelor's degree in English literature with an emphasis in creative writing, whereas she had merely published 40 novels. You got to learn a little humility before you start in this business. It's good for you.
Questions? Yes, sir, in the back.
How do you approach conflict escalation in Dresden Files? I know ever since Aurora's kind of ramped up a lot with the outsiders and how things are going. Were there struggles with how you wanted to escalate in the time frame?
Well, that was easy because I planned the whole thing ahead of time. When I was writing the Dresden Files, I knew what I wanted to do. I remember the day I went to my teacher to talk to her about it because I had turned in the first couple of chapters of the Dresden Files, and she read them and looked up at me and said, "You did it." And I said, "What?" She says, "You did it. You'll be able to sell this. I don't know if it'll be the first thing you sell, but this is writing that someone will pay for." I was like, "Really?" because she did not believe in mollycoddling her students. She gave it to you hard, like you would be getting it in New York. She was preparing us for the real world. So, you know, her critiques before had ranged from long explanations of why things were bad to this is just bad, to rolling up my chapter, leaning across her desk, popping me on the head with it and saying, "What were you thinking?" Oh, right. So she says, "Yeah, you can sell this." And I was like, "Okay." And she says, "Now, next week I want you to come in with an outline for the rest." And I'm like, "Okay." And she meant the rest of the book. So I showed up the next week with this outline for 20 novels with a 3-book trilogy at the end and said, "What do you think?" And she looked back at me, and I can still see the expression on her face in my head. You know, and it was this expression: "I've finally gotten this kid on board. I can't possibly shoot him down now." Yeah, Wile E. Coyote, run off that cliff. But she looked at me and said, "You know what, I think if you can sell a series that's got 20 novels in it, you should be doing fine." To which I replied, "Yeah, okay," because I had come back in with outlines for 20 novels and a big old trilogy at the end, and I chattered about it enthusiastically for 20 minutes without stopping. I think she probably tried to interrupt me at some point in there. From the expression on her face, I think maybe she tried and I just didn't notice. But yeah, I mean that was a big day. But anyway, because I had written the entire thing out, you know, I blocked out the outline for the whole series, and basically I knew what all the newspaper headlines were going to say through the course of the series. And having done all that, you know, it was not difficult to do power escalation because I know where I'm going. I know what the destination is, so it's like, okay, we step it up this much, now this much, now this much, you know, like that. And so, you know, I know where things are. It's easy if you've got a finite beginning and an end, and I'm not writing an infinite series. Stories have to end, or they aren't stories.
Any question, John?
Yes. Do you have a character in the Dresden Files you'd like to spin off into their own series? If so, which one? And if not, why not?
Which Dresden characters do I feel like spinning off? If so, it's not like something that I feel like spinning off. I am spinning off a character once I'm done with doing Dresden stuff, and then we'll the follow-up series I do will be called Monster LLC. Because yeah, sometimes you have to hire a professional, but when you're really in trouble, sometimes you need a monster. And it's gonna star Goodman Gray, and he runs his business called Monster LLC, and he's a monster for hire. And so I'll be able to write stories, you know, with him, and it'll be probably a much grayer series, but we'll see. You know, I don't know what it'll turn out like, but.
Unintended.
You've done some really wonderful things with minor characters that turned into something bigger like Butters. Were there characters that you thought that you made, you thought maybe this would be big, and then you got torn away from?
No. I mean, as far did I do characters that, you know, that I thought were going to be big that just fell flat? No, that hasn't happened so far. I mean, if you know what you're doing, you build the character, and you build the necessary background, and you make sure that the reader can see who that character is and where they're coming from. And so far, it's worked out. But it's stuff you got to do ahead of time. You know, you got to do a whole lot of work ahead of time. It kind of sucks. It's like a job.
Lady in the back?
I was wondering, are you going to do any more short stories with Molly Carpenter, and any of her siblings going to show up with some magic ability as well?
Am I going to do short stories with Molly? I really hate writing short stories. I don't enjoy it at all. But apparently I don't hate it as much as I hate saying no to people who want me to write short stories for them. So maybe. Although Molly's sort of, you know, kind of her story path is not towards, it's not towards being familiar and human, you know. So it might be a little bit more difficult. As far as the other siblings in the Carpenter family, nah. By the time the other kids were coming along, her mom had buried that stuff so deep it wasn't coming back. So.
Yes, sir.
So I'll think back to this teacher you had. Were there any things that now you still hold? You accept a lot of her lessons. Is there anything you still hold fast to, or you disagree with her on, or you might have innovated on her own methods with?
For my writing teachers, there are things that I disagreed with or innovated on. Not really. There's some things that she does that I don't think are necessary, so I don't do them. My primary rule for writing is keeping it simple. Just the whole principle of keep it simple, stupid, yeah, applies to writing. That's almost always the problem when I find myself stuck at some point in the story, writing a story, is I'm overcomplicating this, and I don't need to. I need to go back to fundamentals. So fundamentals, they win fights, and they also make good novels, apparently, so.
Go ahead.
Out of all the different one-liners, references, in-jokes that you put into the series over the years, is there one in particular you're especially proud of? And if not, is there one that you thought would get more recognition or more fan feedback than it?
I will say this: I never thought anybody. I made it was. I think it was in. Which is the one with Shag Nasty? Yeah. Yeah, I made a Greek mathematician reference in Turncoat, which I thought no one would get. I was wrong. Y'all are some nerds, man. As far as particular one-liners, nah. I mean, the best one-liner is the next one-liner. Occasionally, though, I'll write them and they come out of nowhere, and then I'm just kind of pleased with them. And now the early books, it's been long enough since I've looked at them that I can go back through and not really remember the plot. So it's like reading a really good novel. This is just the way I would have written it. Which is what makes a good novel. When you're a writer. I wouldn't have done it like that. But.
And yours, sir? Right here, in the back. Yes.
So forgive my ignorance because I'm only a few books in, but as a person that owns a bobtail cat, how come no one has questioned why Mister is missing his tail? I get that question almost monthly.
He's an outdoor cat in Chicago, man. I mean, odds are excellent it was a car. I think Mister almost got eaten by something when he was little. And that was when, somewhere around that time is when Dresden found him, so.
In the red?
Are you ever going to go back to the Codex Alera?
Am I ever going to go back to the Codex Alera? I've got a couple of places I could go back to. One I could go back and do. I might go back and do a story of the first class of cursors after the end of the series, where Fidelius is in charge of the cursor, is like the dean, and Aaron is the main teacher, and you've got like your first Marat cursor and your first Khanum cursor and so on, because that would be a lot of fun.
I really like the story about the dog man.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. But and then the other way I could do it is I could go back, because honestly, this is humans versus the Zerg, so I could go back in and write the Protoss showing up, and that would also be fun. I mean, it would be like my version of the Protoss, but yeah, I mean, honestly, that's what it is. It's humans versus Zerg.
More fun, more required.
Yeah.
And right there, straight out? Yeah.
So my favorite part of your books is the incorporation of the fairies, like into the whole storytelling thing. How do you take all these different tales and all these different beings and creatures in mythology and whatnot, and create this sort of homogenous mixture where they all work together? They don't necessarily have so much to do with each other outside of their books, but somehow you make it all work in this modern setting.
Right. Well, it's because, that's why it's. I won't say that's why I did it, because it wasn't, but it's very fortunate that I set the book in Chicago. I put it at a crossroads, and crossroads are where you get great stories told and where weird magical things happen. So, as far as how I included it all, I just went in and just my attitude when I'm researching is, how does this fit? Not what do I need to leave out, but what is really great that I can bring in. So it's not really hard with virtually anything to be able to say, well, how do I make this work in? Oh, all right, yeah, this is easy. Really, it doesn't seem to be all that difficult. We have a pretty broad world. There's a little bit of history and stuff to draw on. So, if you know a little bit about it, it's pretty easy to fit things in. The main problem is that I was fortunate in that the first thing I figured out was magic, and I tried to make it a very universal and inclusive thing. Magic in the Dresden Files is something, at least a little magic, is something practically anybody can do. I always use an NBA allegory to talk about how magic works. It's like anybody can learn to shoot a free throw. Not just anybody will make the high school team, and even fewer will make the college team, and very, very few make the NBA. Those are the White Council guys, you know. But it works the same way. You know, you've got to, magic. You've got to be. If you want to do big time magic, you've got to not only be born with talent, but you've got to have work and discipline, and the confluence of those three things is not common. But in the Dresden Files, practically anybody can learn to do at least a little magic. Look at Butters. He had no particular talent at all. He just went out and learned it, you know, and worked a bit and did it. But yeah, but as far as including stuff, once I had figured out how magic worked, the rest was easy.
In the back with the purple? Mm-hmm.
I know that you probably don't play any games or anything like that. You probably don't have a circle of friends that you trust, you know. Don't say, oh God, it's too much. But if you did know those kind of things, how much would you say your group of friends contribute and your experiences of gaming contribute to the views that you have whenever you're writing all of your series, not just Dresden, all the series that you wrote?
I don't know that my gaming contributes much to my writing. My writing contributes a lot to my gaming. You don't want to play with me because I'm a cliffhanger GM. I mean, at the end of the night, something goes horribly wrong, and you know it's coming. But yeah, I mean, I like to game. Right now, I'm running a modified Warhammer fantasy roleplay campaign set in the Cinder Spires story world. So, and because it's PCs, they will not do a damn thing that I set up. So I wind up frantically building the world 6 inches in front of their toes as they walk off in the wrong direction, and that's what does a lot. I mean that helps me get a lot done in my fantasy worlds. I don't run Dresden Files like that, but Alara and Cinder Spires, yeah. It's great because it's a great creative exercise for me. It forces me to develop more background. Lots and lots of writers will talk to you about the iceberg rule of writing, which is that for every word that's on the surface, you've got 9 words underneath that the reader never sees because you have to build that much world. And it's true, you have to do that. And sometimes it sucks. It's like a job.
Yes, sir.
What's your inspiration for the Bigfoot character? Will we see more Bigfoot?
The inspiration for the Bigfoot character is the Bigfoot I saw when I was a kid. I'm not going to talk to you about that. I had recurring nightmares for 30 years, and when I talk about it, they come back, and you're not worth that.
Sir, in the back, by the window.
You talked about the iceberg rule, and I was curious. I know all these characters are like real people in your head.
Yeah.
Is it difficult to develop those characters, all their personality traits?
It's difficult to not develop them. Yeah, I mean, that's my job. Is I write down my conversations with my imaginary friends. But yeah, I mean, you build them in your head, and the characters start doing stuff, and you just kind of keep track, and you have to ask yourself between every book, okay, what's this character been doing since we last saw them? Because people change over time. They change and they grow. It's very unusual for somebody to remain the same. And so I've got to stop. Well, what's this character been doing? All this stuff. And occasionally characters take off in weird directions that I did not expect. And that's cool. That's fine.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of games, what do you think of the Dresden RPG?
The Dresden RPG seems like a fine game. I'm the one person on the planet who can't play it. Because I am a power gaming weasel, and imagine trying to GM me in a Dresden Files. No, it is that way, and if necessary, I'll write it that way in the next book. Mr. GM. And yet, if I'm the GM, too much like work. So I'm glad you guys are having fun. Good, do that by all means. I kind of like the cooperative card game because it comes up with weird story permutations in the parallel universe Dresden world where Harry met Michael in time to fight werewolves with him. Stuff like that. I like that one, but the RPG, no, that one's not for me.
Yes, sir, in the red.
So you're thinking back to the game that you do. I'm sure that a lot of the things that you learned about writing play into how you GM, but I'm sure it's different also having essentially your readers as you're weaving a story for them in front of you and interacting with you. I'm curious if there's any lessons you've learned about writing from GMing.
Not so much. GMing is a cooperative activity. Writing is extremely solitary. In that way. But yeah, I haven't taken a lot from gaming to writing, but from writing to gaming, yeah. That stuff goes over pretty well, unless you plan too much, because your players will screw it up.
Yes, ma'am?
How would you compare, I guess, the pros and cons of hard magic systems versus soft magic systems?
Pros and cons of hard magic versus soft magic. The only difference between hard magic systems and soft magic systems is the point of view of the person practicing the magic. If you're not in the point of view of the person who's doing the magic, it's a soft magic system, because you'll always be looking at the guy and going, well, that's something that's happening with this strange person over there who's not, the person who's not my avatar. That's what writing is good writers drop you into a character and let you be that character for a while. If you don't get to be the wizard, you never really get a good handle on the magic. The wizard might explain things to you, maybe. A good wizard will explain things to you and leave you more confused than you were before you asked the question. But if you're in the point of view of the guy who's doing it, you can't run it like that. You've got to know more about what's going on. Otherwise, I think you run into problems where you got guys like Schmendrick going magic do as you will, which is fine, I guess, but it's just sort of, that's just sort of, random things happening rather than actual choices being made. And random things happening will never be more important in a story than choices being made. So that's why I write a little bit more of a hard system with Dresden, because we're in his point of view. He is the guy who knows how it works. So that meant I had to be the guy who knew how it worked, which meant I had to write rules, which means there's a hard magic system.
In the back?
I know you pulled from at least 8 different cultures I know for the mythology and the different ACDs and characters you bring in. Are there any cultures or specific mythologies that you haven't utilized yet that you're interested in bringing in or that you're researching?
I haven't done a lot of Hindu. I don't know much about it. Haven't done a lot of Middle Eastern stuff. Don't know much about it. The stuff that I do use is stuff that I've been able to find good solid research on for the most part. It's where I can do some reading and I can more or less justify myself, within a fudge factor. If you just go writing about stuff that you got no idea what's going on, then that's probably not a good thing for you as a writer. I've been approached very, very carefully by some Navajo since writing about skinwalkers. Yeah, they sent the person who they sent the person from the tribe who was half white to come talk to me because maybe you speak his language, I don't know, but you need to be careful and evaluate him before you actually have a conversation with him or have a meal with him. So that's interesting, that sort of thing. But I mean it's serious stuff down there. You go to the Southwest, they take that stuff seriously.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I know you said you had 5 cats, and you've written cats so well in...
I had 0 cats before I wrote the book.
Oh.
I didn't actually get any cats until after the book.
So, in saying that, are there any cats, like your physical cats, that inspired the cats in your books?
No, it's the other way around. We bought 3 Maine Coons and named them, and we named one Mural and one Row because they matched. But the big one is the big white one. His name is Bowie because he's got different colored eyes. But he's like a 30-pound long-haired Maine Coon, with a pure white with a green eye and a blue eye, and he'll be in the next book. He'll be in the next book as the Commodore. He'll be the ship's cat for Bayard's ship. Commodore Beauregard, or Commodore Beauregard is what they call him. They call him Beau, which is what we call Bowie as well. We call him Beau. And he'll always be the cat that's just a little bit better than Raoul at everything without really trying. And he's Mural's older brother, so Raoul hates him, but has to put up with him, So, but then we got 2 more cats. We got Zatanna. Zatanna was a feral cat who got born under our porch, and Kitty went and rescued the feral kittens because they were dying. And so she managed to save 2 of them. And one of them we got to in time to socialize. And so he's with a family who spoils him outrageously now. He's this big Persian-looking cat. He's ridiculous. And then the other one was Zatanna. She's a little tiny tuxedo, 4-pound kitten-sized cat. And so we named her Zatanna because she has a tuxedo. And she doesn't like people very much. But she bonded to our cats though, so we got our cat a cat. And then we had 3 more kittens that were found abandoned, and we found homes for 2 of them and kept 1 of them. And it turns out they weren't actually kittens; they were 5 years old, and they're just tiny from being malnourished. And they conned us into thinking they were kittens, and now they all have a decent home. So one of them his name is Fenris. He's the one who stays with us, and he's a foster cat. We're gonna give him away someday. I mean, I know he sleeps on everybody's lap and everything like that and rides around on my shoulder, but we'll give him away. Damn cat, he's a liar. And a swindler.
Is that why you named him Fenris?
No, that was Kitty named him that off of Dragon Age. Just because she likes Fenris. But Fenris is the alpha cat in the house now. He's the smallest animal in the house and he runs it. So Fenris, like, he's like, when like Brew comes up to mess with it, Brew will come up and try and be a little bit friendly, and Brew's my pit bull. And Brew, Brew's a 90-pound pit bull, so, and pit bull version of friendly is a little enthusiastic. So he'll come up to sniff Fenris and like knock him off the furniture, by doing it. And Fenris will just look at him, and just the look on his face is, hey man, I'm not angry at you, but I'm disappointed. And he does this to all the cats, and he's the first one to eat, and he gets to check out Brew's bowl before Brew gets to eat, and all that, but he's the one who's in charge of the house. He might be in charge of us, I'm not sure. Which probably means that he is. Jeez. But he's like, but he's very cool though. We'll take him out. I'll take him outside on walks. I'll put him on a harness and take him outside on walks, because he can handle the outdoors. He's very fine with it. Just super chill. So pretty good cat as far as cats go. He'll make a nice cat for somebody someday.
So for like typical moments when Harry deals with Susan, or very frustrating moments when Harry has his moment with Murphy in Skin Games, do you sort of sadistically chuckle to yourself knowing how people react, or do you maybe react the same as us, just knowing that the story has to take that route?
Sadistic is a strong word. That said, I do occasionally judge what effect my writing has had based on how many gifs of table flipping get put up by the betas after I put the chapter up. I write to a live audience so I can judge people's reactions as I go, and that's that's so I'll write a chapter and the betas will read it and feed it back to me. There are times where I'll be like, there are times where I get up close to like big stuff that I've been looking forward to writing for a couple of decades, 25 years in some of it. And so like when I, at the end of Changes, when I did what I did, because some people in here haven't read it, but I've been planning on that for a while. So it's like, okay, well, I stayed up till 4 a.m. finishing this, but Priscilla usually wakes up at 6, so I can wait a couple hours and then post it so I get a live reaction and then go to bed. So stuff like that. But my editor's reaction to that was extremely over the top. And I had to be like, yeah, calm down, now we can do the fun stuff, But anyway.
You have a question, sorry? Yeah.
How did you figure out the rules for Magic?
How did I figure out the rules for Magic? I went to the metaphysics section at Borders, when we still had Borders. And, no wait, it was Hastings. When we still had Hastings. And I didn't have very much money because I was a poor college student. So I decided, okay, I've got enough money for 3 books. And I picked 3 books at random. They were all Llewellyn Press books. So like Fairy Wicca and something about tarot and something else. It was a Fairy Wicca book I wound up using the most of. Because that had the approach of a very, it had very much the approach of magical belief as something that was super personalized to individuals. So I was like, oh yeah, I like working with that, because if it's all personalized to individuals, I can make it look like whatever I want based on who the character is, and that seems to fit. That was sort of where I started, and then went from there. And I went and took basic beliefs of magical practice and said, let's just literalize these things. And this stuff is really cool. This stuff sucks. Because this stuff will make for good story, and this stuff will stop story from happening. So I threw away all the stuff that I thought would stop story from happening, and kept all the stuff that I thought was interesting and cool. and went from there.
Yes, ma'am.
Will there be more episodes from Mouse's point of view?
More stuff from Mouse's point of view, probably. Yeah, I got roped into this anthology. Like I said, I hate saying no to people. So somebody came up with this anthology that says we want to write an anthology that's all animal stories, and we're going to dedicate all the money to animal shelters. And to which I said, yeah, okay. To which I said, yeah, okay, and let me get you the email addresses of all these other big authors that I know. Here's Rothfuss, here's Sanderson, like that, going down the list of people to ask, because that's the kind of thing. You get to my point in life and in the career, and you like writing your stuff and everything and so on, but you also look around and think, what am I actually doing? What am I gonna, besides just writing stories and getting royalty checks, what am I doing with my life? And it's like, and for me, it's like I want to help animals, so that's what I'm doing. And so I think you actually for a project like that's a charity project, you're probably better off going to the big time writers, because the folks who haven't got there yet are more like, I would love to, but I want to eat, like that. So kind of where we are now.
Yes, sir.
So you said you planned out the Dresden Files. Were you ever concerned about bringing religion into your story? Was there ever a concern for you that it might get divisive?
No. I don't see why you can't write religion and treat it respectfully. Seems easy enough, So I started off with the Knights of the Cross, because why not? And with Christianity, because I have a fairly thorough schooling in theology in that area. I grew up on the fun end of fundamental Christianity as opposed to the mental end. Yeah, I mean, because you get to the point where and you take it seriously. I mean, I would go to Bible camp, every summer. I was one of those guys that memorized books of the Bible to get extra points for our team. I did a lot of talking with preachers and later on with priests. I made a lot of friends. I talked religion with a lot of people. Most people who are into theology, they understand that you're wrestling with really big questions that nobody's come up with answers for yet, and that some answers that look good, but there's problems with them, and other answers look awful, but they seem to kind of work. And how do we deal with that? And so so I met my Wiccan friend, and talked a long time with an imam for a while when I was in college, and talking about these different ideas. What happens after we die? No one knows. We don't know. We'll find out eventually. But yeah, I mean, it's all. I think religion asks. It's always trying to answer questions that we all have. That is the kind of fundamental to our humanity. And as a result, I don't see why you can't talk about it and talk about it respectfully. I mean, some people get real worked up about it because it's their thing. And once religion has become your fandom, well, it's kind of an issue. A lot of people get real attached to it, but what it's there for is to answer these questions. And so I've found people from all kinds of religions who are happy to talk with me about their beliefs and how a Hindu addresses various issues. But yeah, I mean, I knew I was doing okay because on the same day I got a letter from a Catholic cardinal who wanted to thank me for how respectful I treated his beliefs in my books. And the same day I got an email from a Wiccan high priest who wanted to thank me for how respectfully I treated his beliefs in my books. So, from there on, I did want to write a Christian character, though, who was not either an idiot or a fanatic, because that seems to be mostly the representation they get. So I decided, I'm going to try and write somebody who actually lives up, to what he believes. And at that point, you're writing a Christian who actually lives up to everything you believe? You can't even do that. You've been trying your whole life. He's kind of a superhero. Oh, I guess I better make him a superhero. And so off we went.
In the round?
Back to the Dresden RPG. There's little sticky notes and stuff in there. Have they ever gotten too close to stuff that hasn't been published yet?
Yeah, I had to delete all kinds of stuff. I was really pleased. I was really pleased that they had come up with all these potential story leads and so on, but I was like, no, you can't play with those. I'm already playing with those. Go away. But it pleased me very much that I had given them the background of the story universe, and then they had logically put together the same things I had logically put together. So it was like, ooh, this must work. It must be kind of sound if other people can take it and go to the same places. I was really pleased with how Evil Hat researched the stuff. I mean, it was run by my gaming buddy from college, Fred. He ran the company, but he wasn't necessarily actually working on the material the whole time. That was other people. But Fred was like, trust me, they're nerdy enough. And coming from Fred, that's a recommendation. So, but it was a lot of fun. I would have we would get together about every 3 weeks, and I would just talk for 2 or 3 hours about the world, and try and answer questions as best I could that they had. And a lot of times that's fun because I don't know the answers to the question until somebody asks me. So, somebody asks me to answer the question, well, what is the answer to that question? Oh, obviously, it's this. Now I know something cool about my world, and it sounds like it was there the whole time, So.
Just your intellectus coming in.
Oh, yeah, it's my intellectus, exactly. It's definitely just not my BS.
Yes, sir?
So, you talk about you have a lot of control of your world and whatnot, and I know you've written other people's universes. How open are you for other people to write in Dresden or...
Maybe when I'm done. Yeah, I sweat about that. No. To be fair, it's because I've had bad experiences with people doing that, because it's all been screenplays. So, but yeah, I do get tired of seeing stuff and being like, no. Harry Dresden does not get run out of town and spend 4 weeks in Cabo. With what money? How does he get there? There's issues.
Yes, sir.
So, obviously you've put out 2 new pieces of microfiction the past couple months with the lead up to these talks.
Huh?
Any chance you'd be willing to give us a little hint or a preview of what else you've got planned between now and the release of the next book?
I don't know. The next book's like soon. She's the one you need to talk to. Yeah, I wrote a bunch of microfiction and stuff, microfiction and short fiction, and it's coming out. But I probably need to do a little bit more. And then we'll put I'm gonna put the Christmas Eve story at the end of one of the books before too long here. So.
And if I could just get a quick follow up to that with the Morgan microfiction, without getting into it in case people haven't read it yet. Was that something that was just in the back of your head, or was that actually part of the master plan the entire time?
It's the plan, Morgan was always the guy who was really not all that bad a guy if you weren't Harry Dresden. It's just that he had. Circumstance and fate had arranged things for him to just be a nightmare for Dresden. That was his purpose in the world. And I had to stop and think, okay, well, how do you get somebody who is more or less somebody with a code of honor and ethics and make him behave the way I need him to behave without just making him a jerk? Now, you see Morgan through Dresden's point of view, so he's always a jerk except for kind of at the very end. He's kind of a jerk at the very end. But yeah, the Dresden Files story from other people's points of view is a very different story. We get Harry's point of view because he's right in the middle of the furball, so he has a very different take on things than everybody else. But if I was writing this story from the Merlin's point of view, Harry would essentially be Loki. He's this agent of chaos who keeps causing problems. And from other people's point of view, it's very different. The further away you get from Dresden, the weirder the world looks because it's a different world than what he sees.
We have about 5 more minutes. In the back in the blue.
Are there any types of creative practices that you would encourage other people to take part in, like whenever you write your short fiction or anything else like that?
Like what?
I understand that some different writers have different ways of trying to branch into other areas.
Oh.
Like in your research and stuff like that. I understand that a lot of different people will explicitly go out of their way to go into different genres or anything like that. Do you have any similar practices to broaden your horizons that you think that other people should?
Broad horizons. Do what you love. You might try some other things once in a while. I suppose I tried to write an urban fantasy novel once to prove my teacher was wrong. Jury's still out on whether that was a good idea or not. Let's see, long term. No, don't take your advice from other people. Take your advice from you. When you're doing creative stuff, you're doing creative stuff. It's you and the creative stuff. There really aren't a lot of other people involved in terms of, at least as a writer. You know, if you're a writer, if you're an artist, you don't necessarily have other people involved in your stuff all the time. So they should probably have a bit of a limited say on what you do. So take their stuff with a grain of salt. Figure out what works for you. Magic is a highly individualized practice.
In the back?
I know that your foray into the heist subgenre went really well. Are there any other subgenres that you're interested in bringing in Dresden or in future works that you haven't played with yet?
Dystopia, apocalypse, kaiju, professional wrestling. And we got to do a dragon book still, so. Right? We'll have to break some laws of magic for that one, definitely.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I know the TV didn't go too well. Has there ever been any talks about an animated series?
There's been several different things that I was sort of into. We'll have to see in the future. I think you're more likely to see animation on one of my other properties. I might be able to do something with the Lara. We'll see. That'd be fun. There's talks about an anime. We'll see if it happens. But yeah, in Japan, they take that stuff serious. They're like, we need to buy the Codex Alera song rights for the song. And I'm like, oh, the song rights. I will sell those to you. They're right here. But yeah, I want to do some different stuff in the future. If we do get a show, I want a part on the show. I want to be Harry's upstairs neighbor, who's just constantly bothered by everything that's happening, and occasionally the floor gets blown out and stuff like that. Dresden's always loud and annoying, you know. Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. My Stan Lee role.
Yes, ma'am.
Will we get to know more about the daughters as the books come out?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's the idea. They kind of have to be there a bit, you know. So, but at the same time, they're going to grow up at child speed, so don't expect it to happen, you know, anytime soon.
Yes, sir.
Are we ever going to figure out exactly how McNally's pub became neutral territory?
Oh, that would be a good story, actually. Yeah, it'd be like a good short story. It might not be. It might just be Mac filling out the paperwork and turning it in. Here's the paperwork. Here's my $50 fee. You know, whatever it is.
Did you have another question, sir?
Yeah. As a very brief preface, I have a personal project I was working on, and I had a really good idea for it. I went to my documents, and I realized 3 months prior I had the same idea, and it conflicted with 3 other things anyway. So you're making sure you maintain, protect your ideas, you organize them, and that you don't have them conflict with each other is a huge challenge. To what extent have you come to that?
I don't write down any of my ideas. If they're not good enough for me to remember without help, they're not good enough to write. That's my method. It's worked for me. I got a really good memory though, so you know, at least for nerdy story stuff anyway.
Yes, ma'am.
I've been listening to your books and audiobooks, and
Well, that's all about James Marsters, let's be honest.
I was curious how he splits over his style and how that goes, because it gives a different vibe for sure, as opposed to reading it.
Oh yeah. He reads it differently than I write it. A lot of times he will. I mean, he doesn't change words or anything, but he messes with inflections and timing, and occasionally just rips your freaking heart out with it too. Well done, James. If we do get a show, we need to get him. Maybe Marcone. I think he'd be a fine Marcone. He's just such a good villain.
I think we have time for one more question. Anyone? Well, then it is time to wrap up.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.